Hello, welcome to your video on one-step equations. By the end, you will be able to solve one-step equations and check your solution. The first question you want to ask yourself is, how do I solve by adding and subtracting? The main question that you are looking to answer is, what's being done and how do I undo it? That's when you're solving for equations, you're trying to get the variable by itself, so you have to know what's being done so that you can undo it and make the variable stand by itself. The phrase do, undo is kind of the catchy terms here, but that's what you're going to be looking for. What's being done and how do I undo it? So let's take the first example here. We have x plus 4 equals 7. You're going to want to draw your stream or your river because it's a balance, so you want whatever's on the left side of your river to be balanced and equal to the right side of the river. So what's being done? Well, to have the x by itself, it is being added by 4. So I need to undo that adding of 4. How do I do that? By subtracting 4. And what I have to do on one side, I have to do it to the other because you need to keep it balanced. Plus 4 and minus 4, that's going to make 0. So now I'm just left with x. Drop down the equal sign because it's flowing, that's going down the river. And then 7 minus 4 is 3, so x equals 3. Now you would think that you're done with the problem, but you're actually not, because you need to check your solution. So what you're going to do is put your answer to x back into the original problem. So x plus 4 equals 7. I'm going to say that x is 3. So I'm going to take 3 plus 4 equals 7, and you need to check that. 3 plus 4 is 7. 7 equals 7, so I know that it is the correct solution to my equation. Next example is y minus 2 equals 18. So again, I'm going to make my river of the equal sign. Y minus 2, what's being done? Well, I have y being subtracted by 2. So how do I undo it? I need to add 2. And what I do on one side of the river, I have to do to the other side of the river. Minus 2 and plus 2, that's going to equal 0, so I kind of put a 0 symbol over that. So now I drop down what's left, y, drop down my equal sign, and then 18 plus 2 is 20, so y equals 20. Now I have to, now I have to check my solution to make sure it works. So what I'm going to do is take that original problem, so y minus 2, and plug in the 20. So I now have 20 minus 2 equals 18. 20 minus 2 is 18, and 18 equals 18. So that is a solution I know I have solved correctly. I don't know why that's being weird, but we'll go with it. Alright, next one, last one. Negative 6 plus m equals negative 2. So again, I draw my little river. Negative 6 plus m, what's being done to that variable? Well, I have, I'm adding, but it's a negative 6, and I want to get a 0 pair out of that. So this is where it kind of gets a little bit tricky. You have to think about how you're going to get a 0. And the way that you're going to get a 0 is not by it going to be by adding 6. Even though that there is an addition sign, you're adding a negative 6. And so if you think about adding the opposite, adding negative 6 is the same thing as subtracting 6. And so that's why I can just say plus 6 here. I can also think of a 0 pair because that's what you're essentially doing. You want it to equal 0. And how am I going to get it to equal 0? That would be if I add 6. And what I do on one side of the river, I have to do on the other side. Drop down what I didn't use, so I now have m equals, and then negative 2 plus 6 would give me positive 4. Another way you can kind of go about figuring out what you have to do is look at the number and the sign in front. Because there's that plus sign there, it actually is associated with the m. and not the negative 6. So that's another way you can kind of look at that if that's confusing to you. Now I need to check my solution to make sure that I did actually solve this correctly. So I have negative 6 plus m, and m is 4. And then that equals negative 2. Negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 equals negative 2. That's balanced. So my solution is correct. It is important that you are solving and checking your solutions. That'll be something that you're required to do. So make sure you're also putting the checking of solutions on your video notes. Your turn. I'm going to have you solve these 3 equations. And then make sure you're checking your solution also. I'll be looking for that in your notes because that is something that you're going to be required to do for every time that you solve an equation. So you need to solve all 3 of these and check your solutions. When you've done all of that, you can turn the video back on to check your answers. Alright, here's the first one. I'll show you, kind of walk you through it. Subtract 5 on both sides of that river. That'll turn into a 0 pair. So m equals, and then negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. And then you'll want to check your answer. So 5 plus negative 8 equals negative 3. 5 plus negative 8 is negative 3. Negative 3 equals negative 3, so it works. That's what I'm looking for. Number 2. I'm not going to walk you through everything, but you should have added 10 on both sides, making x equal to 15. And then when you check that, it does, in fact, work. Number 3, I'm going to walk you through how to solve that one, just because it's the trickiest one. Think about the number and the sign in front. So that plus sign, even though it's adding, is actually attached to the c and not the 7. The 7 is negative 7, so I'm going to add 7 on both sides of my river. That turns to a 0 pair, which is what I want. C equals, and then negative 12 plus 7 is 5. Negative 5 though. And then when I check, I have negative 7 plus, and then C is negative 5 equals negative 12. Negative 7 plus negative 5, negative 12 equals negative 12, and that works. The next one, how do I solve by multiplying and dividing? You're still going to ask yourself what's being done and how do I undo it. So do, undo is kind of the phrase that you're going to be working with. And that is important as we solve these. So the first problem, m divided by 4 equals negative 7. You're still going to draw your river. And then you're going to ask yourself what's being done. How is m attached to everything else? Well, m is being divided by 4. So how do I undo being divided by 4? I'm going to multiply by 4. Okay, or multiply by 4 over 1. When that happens, you're canceling out these. They're oneing out, in other words. And what you do on one side, you have to do on the other side to keep it balanced. So now I have m equals, and then negative 7 times 4 would be negative 28. You're not done yet, though, because you have to check your solution. So I'm going to take negative 28, because that's what m is, divided by 4 equals negative 7. Negative 28 divided by 4, negative 7 equals negative 7. That is correct. I've solved my equation properly and have come to the right answer. Next one, negative 5c equals negative 45. Again, draw my river, and then negative 5c. What's being done to that variable? It is being multiplied by negative 5. There's a multiplication sign in between there, you just can't see it. So I need to undo multiplying, which is dividing. So I'm going to divide by negative 5. And what I do on one side, I have to do on the other side. So now this one's out. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1c, or we just write c either way. Negative 45 divided by negative 5 is going to be positive 9. Now that I've found my answer, I'm going to check it. So now I'm going to plug that back into the original equation. So negative 5 times c, which would be 9, equals negative 45. Negative 5 times 9 is negative 45. Negative 45 equals negative 45. So that is a correct solution. I've solved it correctly. Last one. This is the trickiest kind of problem because you have a fractional coefficient, but you're still going to treat it the same. You're going to draw your river, okay, and then you're going to ask yourself what's being done. It's being multiplied by 3/4. So that means I need to divide by 3/4 on both sides. Okay, but what do you know about dividing by a fraction? Well, you actually have to multiply by the reciprocal. And so instead of saying dividing by 3/4, you're going to kind of skip that step, and you're going to say multiplying by the reciprocal. So you're going to multiply by 4/3. And this is why it works. Because when I do this, my goal is to get x by itself. You want to have a 1x when you're done. And 4 times in the numerator and 4 in the denominator, I can divide out and I get 1s. I'm dividing by 4 in each case. Same thing with 3. I can cross simplify and I'm getting a 1 in both of these situations. So 1 times 1 and 1 times 1, that's all 1. And so I'm actually getting a 1x, which is just x, and that's what I want. Then I'm going to multiply by 4/3 on the other side because I have to keep it balanced. Okay, I look to cross simplify. In this case, I can't. So 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 3 is 3. So I have x equals 8/3, which I can simplify if I want to. And that would be, how many times is 3 going to 8? It goes twice because that would give me 6. And then there are 2/3 left over. So either way, I can use that. It doesn't matter, either one would be the correct answer, but it is helpful to simplify it as far down as you can. Then we need to check our answer. So I have 3/4 times x, so I'm going to multiply it, and in this case I'm going to use my 8/3 just because multiplying fractions is easier versus an improper fraction, because you're just going to have to turn it, or a mixed number, because you're just going to have to turn it into an improper fraction anyways, and that equals 2. So now I'm going to look to cross simplify, and I can do it twice actually. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1. 2 over 1 equals 2, and so 2 equals 2, because 2 over 1 is 2. That checks out, so I did solve my equation correctly. It is your turn. Here are 3 problems for you. Please solve each of these. So solve for your variable, ask yourself do, undo, and make sure you check all 3 solutions, because that's what I'm looking for on your notes, just like you copied down checking the solution when I did the examples for you. Same rules apply. When you've solved all of these, you've checked them, you have that all on your notes page, then you can turn the video back on to check your answers. Alright, here are your answers to the first 2 problems, and then I'm actually going to walk you through question number 3, because I think that one's just harder. So question number 3, 1/3 y equals negative 18. You're going to draw your river. Then you're going to, because it's a fractional coefficient, you want it to equal 1 y. That's your goal. So I'm going to actually multiply by the reciprocal, because we're kind of skipping that in-between side. So I'm going to multiply by 3/1. What I do on one side, I have to do on the other. Okay? Because this one's out and this one's out. Okay? Because of cross simplification. So that gives me y equals. And then I have to do the same thing over here. Put it over 1 so we can multiply fractions. There's no way to cross simplify here. So negative 18 times 3. And if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know it in your head, 3 times 8 is 24. and then 3 times 1 is 3 plus 2 is 54, and then we have negative times a positive, which is a negative, so negative 54. Then you're going to want to check your answer just to make sure you did it right. So you're going to go back to the problem. So 1/3 times negative 54 over 1 equals negative 18. You can cross simplify this by dividing by 3, which would give you 1 here. Divide by 3, that would give you negative 18. Negative 18 times 1 is negative 18. 1 times 1 is 1, which is the same thing as 18. Negative 18 equals negative 18. That works out. I have the right answer. Alright, this is the end of your video. Thanks for watching. Have an excellent day.